What are some of the benefits that visa-free travel would bring to Africans?
The first thing is money.
Afternoon sunlight washed over Ouagadougou as Burkina Faso's cabinet concluded one of its most consequential meetings in recent memory. When Security Minister Mohamed Issanou stepped before the press, the nation braced itself for routine announcements. Instead, he delivered words that would ripple across the entire continent. All Africans, regardless of where they come from, can now enter Burkina Faso without paying visa fees. It sounded almost unbelievable in a world where borders are tightening and travel is often a privilege of the wealthy. Yet this was no rumor whispered through unofficial channels. It was a government decree, signed by none other than Captain Ibrahim Traoré himself, Burkina Faso's young and defiant leader. From that moment, a nation often cast as fragile suddenly reintroduced itself as bold, confident, and ready to embrace the continent. A digital doorway, not a barrier. The details stunned many. Any African citizen could now apply online for travel authorization, free of charge. Gone were the consular fees, embassy queues, and bureaucratic hurdles that for years turned borders into barricades. In their place stood a streamlined digital process designed not to exclude, but to welcome countless Africans who had grown weary of being treated as strangers on their own continent. This was nothing short of revolutionary. The cold mechanics of immigration paperwork had been replaced with a simple message: "Come, enter. This land is yours too." The symbolism of Traoré presiding over this decision cannot be overstated. For a nation in the throes of conflict, it was a defiant gesture, a declaration that Burkina Faso refuses to be defined by its struggles. The shockwave of reactions almost immediately, social media erupted. Hashtags celebrating a new dawn for African travel spread like wildfire. Young people hailed it as a victory for Pan-Africanism, a policy that spoke directly to their dreams of mobility, connection, and unity. Commentators drew parallels with Rwanda, Kenya, and Ghana, countries that had recently moved toward similar openness. But Burkina Faso's announcement felt different. Rwanda is known for stability. Ghana carries a long reputation for hospitality. Kenya is a rising economic hub. Burkina Faso, however, is often described only in terms of insecurity. That contrast made the move all the more striking. It was bold, almost defiant, and therefore powerful. Practical impacts on the ground. Traders across West Africa immediately recognized the benefits. For small-scale entrepreneurs who survive on thin margins, visa fees can be the difference between profit and loss. Eliminating them lowers costs and encourages more commerce across borders. Tour operators and cultural organizers began to imagine new possibilities. Ouagadougou's famous film festival could now attract far more African visitors. Musicians, artists, and performers could flow into the city with fewer obstacles. Even academics and students who often struggle with high visa expenses when attending conferences now saw an open door. The announcement was not just about symbolism, it promised real, tangible effects on people's lives. Why now? The timing raised deeper questions. Why would Burkina Faso, a nation still battling insurgency and displacement, take such a bold step? Some argued it was an attempt to shift the global narrative, from one of insecurity to one of unity. Others saw it as a strategic move to reinforce solidarity after Burkina Faso, alongside Mali and Niger, broke away from ECOWAS, the regional bloc once considered central to West African integration. Leaving ECOWAS carried the risk of isolation. But instead of retreating, Burkina Faso widened its circle. The message was unmistakable. We may have left ECOWAS, but we have not left Africa. By opening its doors to Africans everywhere, Burkina Faso flipped the script. It was no longer a nation turning inward, but one expanding outward on its own terms. Defying colonial borders, the decision also carries symbolic weight rooted in history. Africa's borders are not African creations, they are colonial scars. Lines drawn by European powers partitioned communities, divided ethnic groups, and fractured natural economies. For decades, those lines hardened into walls. By removing barriers, even partially, Burkina Faso is rejecting colonial logic and embracing African will. Rather than waiting for the African Union or ECOWAS to deliver long-promised reforms, Burkina Faso chose to act, unilaterally, boldly, and immediately. A domestic message inside Burkina Faso. The announcement resonated deeply. Citizens face daily challenges: violence, displacement, economic hardship. By presenting the nation as a leader in continental unity, The government offered its people something larger than hardship. A sense of pride and purpose. It positioned Burkina Faso not as a victim of crisis, but as a pioneer of freedom. For a nation so often portrayed in the media as fragile, this was a narrative shift that gave citizens dignity and hope. A global contrast. The timing also highlights a deliberate contrast with the West. As Western nations raise visa costs, tighten immigration rules, and build walls, Burkina Faso has chosen the opposite path. It tells Africans, while others shut you out, we welcome you. It tells the world, Africa does not need to mirror your example. This policy is not simply administrative. It is a statement of defiance in a global order where Africans are too often treated as outsiders. The man behind the decision. To understand the vision driving this move, one must look to the man behind it, Captain Ibrahim Traoré. Still in his 30s, Traoré is unlike the polished, Western-trained statesmen of old. He is a soldier who rose from the chaos of a besieged nation and seized power in 2022, not by promising loyalty to old masters, but by vowing to defy them from the start. His message has been Pan-African to the core. Africa must break free from the chains of colonialism, both visible and invisible. Unlike others who watered down such rhetoric with concessions, Traoré has consistently matched words with action. Abolishing visa fees for Africans is not a conference speech. It is a real policy with everyday consequences. It transforms Pan-Africanism from an idea into lived experience. This willingness to act rather than merely speak is what separates him from many leaders before him. Symbol of a generation. Traoré's rise also coincides with Africa's generational shift. The continent is young, restless, and hyper-connected through social media. In this digital age, his blunt words and symbolic actions spread rapidly, often turning him into a meme, a symbol, even a hero. Whether exaggerated or not, his image resonates with millions of Africans who are disillusioned with leaders beholden to foreign interests. He embodies authenticity, an officer in fatigues, red beret tilted, speaking about Africa's right to chart its own destiny. Even when critics accuse him of authoritarianism, his Pan-African gestures overshadow those critiques in the eyes of his supporters. Political armor through Pan-Africanism. For Traoré, Pan-Africanism is not just ideology, it is protection. By positioning Burkina Faso as a continental trailblazer, he shields himself and his government from external isolation. Western sanctions or criticisms lose their sting when a leader is embraced as a symbol of African unity. Every African who crosses into Burkina Faso without paying fees becomes a small act of validation. Each traveler strengthens the government's legitimacy and weakens attempts to paint the country as isolated or illegitimate. A wider continental shift. While Burkina Faso's move shocked many, it is not occurring in isolation. Rwanda, Ghana, and Kenya have all taken steps toward visa-free African travel. The African Continental Free Trade Area, launched in 2021, has created the world's largest trade bloc by population. But without mobility, such agreements remain fragile. Free movement of goods requires free movement of people, traders, students, researchers, and cultural ambassadors. Burkina Faso's reform aligns perfectly with this continental momentum, making it part of a larger wave rather than an outlier. It is a declaration that Africa's future integration will not wait on slow negotiations. It is already being written into law. A risk taken in hardship, of course. Challenges remain. Large parts of Burkina Faso remain contested by insurgents. The state is stretched thin. To some, opening borders under such circumstances may seem reckless. Yet this is precisely where the decision finds its power. Unity is not a luxury, it is survival. Insurgencies thrive in isolation. They prey on communities cut off from solidarity. By inviting Africans in, Burkina Faso disrupts that cycle. It sends a message. We are not just a battlefield. We are part of a continental project. Economics of openness. The economic benefits may appear modest at first, but they are real. Lower travel costs mean more tourism, trade, and cultural exchange. Every visiting merchant, performer, or scholar strengthens the country's resilience. These flows of people bring opportunities that no foreign aid package can replicate. In this sense, unity itself becomes a resource, one that insurgents cannot tax and outsiders cannot sanction. The deeper symbolism. Above all, the gesture carries profound symbolic power. For Burkinabe citizens living under the shadow of conflict, it is a reminder that their nation is more than its struggles. For young Africans across the continent, it is proof that even in hardship, A country can choose openness over fear. It restores dignity. It asserts that Africa can light its own path, even in its darkest moments. A challenge to the continent. The question now extends far beyond Ouagadougou. If Burkina Faso, a nation under siege, can open its doors to Africans, what excuse do wealthier, more stable nations have for keeping theirs closed? Burkina Faso has thrown down a challenge, not only to the old colonial logic of borders, but to every African government still clinging to restrictive policies. The world is watching. Africa is watching. And history may well remember this as the moment when a small, embattled nation dared to lead a continental revolution in mobility and unity. That is Burkina Faso's message. In times of hardship, unity is not weakness, it is strength.